Who is the one enemy Dexter Morgan could never defeat? It wasn't a killer or a mastermind. It wasn't someone he could track, trap, or eliminate. This enemy wasn't outside of him. It was born within. From the moment his world was drenched in blood, it took root, whispering in his mind, shaping his every dark decision. Dexter called it the Dark Passenger, a force he could never silence, no matter how hard he tried. But what is the Dark Passenger, and why was it impossible to escape? Stick with us, because the answer will change how you see him forever. Dexter's greatest enemy didn't come from outside. It was born the moment his mother was brutally murdered in front of him. Imagine this, a little boy, frozen in fear, sitting in a pool of his mother's blood. That moment wasn't just traumatic, it created something inside him, something dark. As Dexter grew older, that darkness grew too. It became the voice we now know as the Dark Passenger. But here's the twist. This wasn't just a wound from his past. It was something deeper, something that felt alive, and in a strange way, it gave him purpose. But the events that followed made this darkness even stronger. Harry Morgan, Dexter's adoptive father, saw the signs early: killing animals, a cold lack of emotion. Most parents would turn to therapy, and Harry did. He sought guidance from Dr. Evelyn Vogel, an expert in understanding psychopaths. Together, they designed the Code of Harry, a strict set of rules to help Dexter channel his violent urges by targeting those who truly deserved it. Harry's goal was simple: protect Dexter from society and society from Dexter. But here's the catch. The code wasn't just control, it was permission. By giving Dexter a framework, Harry and Vogel didn't eliminate the darkness. They structured it. The passenger wasn't silenced. It was given a focus, a purpose. Harry thought he was saving Dexter, but he was really teaching the Dark Passenger how to take over. By giving Dexter rules, Harry didn't suppress the darkness. He gave it a system. The Dark Passenger wasn't just a chaotic force anymore. It became methodical, deliberate, and powerful. And when Dexter carried out his first kill under the code, Harry realized too late that his plan hadn't saved his son. It had perfected the monster within him. Even Harry couldn't live with what he'd created. Watching Dexter calmly, almost effortlessly, take another human life shattered him. Harry had always believed he was in control, that the code could channel Dexter's darkness. But in that moment, he saw the truth. The passenger wasn't something you could guide or manage. It was bigger than the code, bigger than him. 3 days later, consumed by guilt and despair, Harry ended his life. His death became the first life the Dark Passenger indirectly claimed. But the Dark Passenger wasn't done. It had only just begun. Dexter tried to live a normal life, a job, a family, a sense of purpose. He did everything society tells us leads to happiness. On the outside, he was the perfect husband, father, and co-worker. But no matter how hard he tried, the passenger was always there, pulling him back into the shadows. It wasn't just a voice whispering in his ear. It was a force, as much a part of him as his heartbeat. He could smile at Rita, laugh with his colleagues, or play with Harrison, but the Dark Passenger was always watching, waiting, reminding him of what he truly was. Think of his wife, Rita. She loved Dexter, not for the darkness he hid, but for the light she believed was in him. To her, he was a protector, a man who shielded her and her children from the cruelties of the world. But to Dexter, she represented something unattainable, a life free from the passenger's grip. She was the closest thing he had to normal, but even she couldn't change the reality of who he was. It's like carrying a beast on your back. No matter how far Dexter ran, no matter how desperately he wanted to be normal, it was always there. It wasn't just a burden. It was a constant reminder that every part of his life, no matter how good it seemed, was built on a lie. And then, Trinity came. The day Rita was murdered wasn't just a tragedy. It was the ultimate proof that Dexter could never escape his darkness. Trinity didn't just kill Rita. He shattered the illusion of Dexter's normal life. And here's where things get chilling. Dexter didn't mourn Rita the way most people would. He didn't cry for her or fall into despair. Instead, the Dark Passenger awoke with a vengeance. But here's the question. Was Dexter's hunt for Trinity about justice for Rita, or was it just another excuse to feed his own need to kill? The truth is uncomfortable. Dexter told himself he was avenging Rita, but deep down, the Dark Passenger didn't care about her. It only cared about the kill. Every step Dexter took in tracking down Trinity wasn't about love or grief. It was about hunger, the satisfaction of the hunt, the thrill of delivering his own twisted brand of justice. And that's the terrifying paradox of the Dark Passenger. It convinces you that you're in control, that your actions are righteous, even as it pulls you deeper into the abyss. Killing Trinity wasn't closure for Dexter, it was fuel for the passenger. A reminder that no matter how hard he tried to hold on to the good in his life, the darkness inside him would always win. Before we continue with this video, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month, so I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. Rita's death wasn't just the loss of a wife or a mother. It was the moment Dexter truly understood that he could never outrun what he was. And the dark passenger? It was just getting started, and it didn't stop there. It would push him even further. By the end of his journey, Dexter started to face a truth he had been avoiding his entire life. The dark passenger wasn't a separate force he could fight or destroy. It wasn't an invader. It was an integral part of him. The carefully constructed walls he built to contain it were never meant to last. Every murder he justified, every promise he made to himself about following the code, wasn't about controlling the passenger. It was about feeding it. The terrifying reality? The dark passenger wasn't just the darkest part of Dexter. It was Dexter. Every time he looked in the mirror, it stared back, whispering that no matter how much good he tried to do, no matter how normal he pretended to be, he was always serving its hunger. And that raises an uncomfortable question. How different are we really? We may not have a dark passenger urging us to kill, but don't we all carry something within us that we can't quite control? Doubts, fears, or desires that quietly shape our decisions, even when we convince ourselves we're in charge? Dexter's struggle feels extreme, but it's also hauntingly familiar. Because the scariest monsters aren't the ones lurking in the shadows, they're the ones living inside us. Dexter's story was never about defeating the dark passenger. It was about learning to coexist with it. But even coexistence has its limits. As his life unraveled, Dexter was forced to make one final choice. Was he a hero? Someone who could channel his darkness for good? Or was he simply a monster, unable to escape his own nature? His answer was isolation. By choosing exile, Dexter didn't just leave his loved ones behind. He abandoned the illusion of control. His decision wasn't about protecting others from him, though that's the story he might tell himself. It was about surrender. Surrendering to the truth that no matter where he went or what he did, the dark passenger would always be there. For Dexter, isolation wasn't peace, it was survival. A grim acknowledgement that the only way to live with the passenger was to keep it away from the people he cared about. But here's where the tragedy of Dexter's story cuts the deepest. In choosing isolation, he didn't just exile himself from society, he exiled himself from hope. Hope that he could ever find redemption. Hope that he could be more than his darkness. By the end, Dexter wasn't just running from the dark passenger. He was running from the possibility of being loved despite it. And maybe that's the real lesson. Some battles aren't meant to be won. They're meant to be endured. Dexter's story reminds us that there's a difference between defeat and surrender. Defeat is when you lose to your darkness. Surrender is when you accept it as part of you. But that acceptance comes at a cost Dexter was willing to pay. So what do we take away from his story? Perhaps it's a reflection of our own lives. We all have shadows we carry, parts of ourselves we wish we could ignore or destroy. But maybe the key isn't to fight them endlessly. Maybe it's to understand them, to live with them, even when it hurts. Because as Dexter shows us, the hardest battles aren't the ones we fight against the world. They're the ones we fight within ourselves. And as Dexter sat alone in the wilderness, staring into the emptiness of his new life, one question remained. Had he found peace, or had he simply given up? The dark passenger was still there, silent but ever present, reminding him that surrender wasn't the same as freedom. So, who is the one enemy Dexter couldn't destroy? It was himself. The dark passenger wasn't just a burden, it was his essence. Have you ever felt like you're fighting your own shadow? Dexter's story reminds us that the hardest battles are the ones we face within ourselves. But what do you think? Could Dexter have escaped, or was he doomed from the start? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.